The announcement that changed everything. Daniel Carter stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, staring at the glittering city skyline. The evening light bathed the room in golden hues, yet his thoughts were elsewhere. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was a moment he had rehearsed in his head 100 times, and yet now that it was here, he found himself hesitating. Behind him, his 8-year-old son, Isaiah, sat cross-legged on a plush white couch, engrossed in his tablet. A pair of headphones hung loosely around his neck, the faint hum of a video playing from the device. Isaiah was a sharp kid. Too sharp sometimes. He noticed things most children his age wouldn't, and Daniel had always admired that about him. But at this moment, he wasn't sure how Isaiah would react to what he was about to say. Taking a deep breath, Daniel turned from the window and walked toward his son. "Hey, buddy," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. Isaiah looked up, pulling one side of his headphones off his ear. "Yeah, Dad." Daniel sat down beside him, his hands clasped together. "I need to talk to you about something important." Isaiah's dark eyes sharpened with curiosity. He closed his tablet and set it aside, sensing the seriousness in his father's tone. "What's up?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "You know how much I love you, right?" Isaiah's small forehead wrinkled. "Of course. And you know I've always tried to make sure you're happy." Isaiah nodded slowly, but his gaze didn't waver. "Yeah. Why?" Daniel sighed. "Well, buddy, I've been seeing someone. Her name is Catherine, and I asked her to marry me." Isaiah's eyes widened. His body stiffened, and he sat up straighter, gripping the edge of the couch. "Marry you?" "Yes," Daniel said gently. "I wanted to tell you first, because you're the most important person in my life." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Isaiah's expression was unreadable. His lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. Daniel felt the tension growing. He had expected questions, maybe even a bit of resistance, but Isaiah's reaction unsettled him. "I know this is a lot to take in," he continued carefully. "But I really care about Catherine. She's kind, she's smart, and I think she would be a great addition to our family." Isaiah finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "What about Mom?" Daniel swallowed hard. He had been dreading this part. "Your mom will always be a part of our lives, Isaiah. No one could ever replace her. But it's been a long time. And I think she would want me to be happy. She'd want both of us to be happy." Isaiah lowered his gaze, staring at his small hands resting on his lap. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he chewed on his bottom lip, a habit he had when he was deep in thought. Daniel gave him space, waiting. He knew better than to rush him. After a long pause, Isaiah looked up. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you love her?" Daniel nodded. "I do." Isaiah blinked a few times, processing. "Does she love me?" Daniel hesitated for the briefest moment before answering. "She cares about you, Isaiah, and she wants to get to know you better." Isaiah's fingers fidgeted with the hem of his hoodie. "But she doesn't love me." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Love takes time, buddy, but I promise she's excited to be a part of our lives." Isaiah didn't look convinced. His lips pressed into a thin line. "When's the wedding?" "In a few months," Daniel answered cautiously. "We still have time to prepare. I was hoping you'd help me with some of the planning. You know, picking out things you'd like for the ceremony." But Isaiah shook his head. "I don't think I want to go." Daniel's chest tightened. "Isaiah." His son stood up suddenly, his small frame tense. "I need to go to my room." Daniel exhaled slowly, watching as Isaiah grabbed his tablet and walked away, his little shoulders stiff with emotion. He didn't slam the door, but the quiet click as it shut behind him spoke volumes. Daniel ran a hand down his face. He had expected some hesitation, maybe even a little pushback, but Isaiah's reaction worried him. He had never reacted so strongly to anything before. For a long time, Daniel sat there, staring at the closed door. Something about this didn't feel right. Later that night, Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying his conversation with Isaiah, trying to figure out what had unsettled his son so much. Catherine was wonderful. She was elegant, intelligent, and charming. She had a way of lighting up a room, and she had been patient with Daniel when he had hesitated to move forward. She wasn't just some random woman. She was someone he truly believed could bring stability back into his life. But Isaiah's reaction had been more than just normal childhood resistance to change. It was something deeper. Daniel reached for his phone and scrolled through his messages until he found one from Catherine. "Good night, love. Can't wait to finalize the details tomorrow." He hesitated, then typed back, "Good night. We need to talk about Isaiah soon." As he put the phone down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He just didn't know what. The next morning, the smell of pancakes filled the kitchen as Daniel stood over the stove, flipping golden brown circles onto a plate. He wanted to make breakfast special, a way to smooth over last night's tension. "Isaiah, breakfast is ready," he called. A few moments later, Isaiah appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He wore his usual pajamas, ones with tiny astronauts on them, but there was something in his expression that made Daniel pause. His son's face was unreadable, but his small fingers clutched his tablet tightly. He hesitated before sitting down at the table. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy." Isaiah's eyes flickered with hesitation before he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel set down the spatula and turned to him fully. "Of course. You can ask me anything." Isaiah glanced down at his tablet, his thumb hovering over the screen. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Do you really know who Catherine is?" Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Isaiah bit his lip. "Because I think I found something about her, and I don't think she's who she says she is." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Isaiah, what are you talking about?" Isaiah hesitated for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned the tablet around. Daniel's eyes widened as he saw the screen. And in that instant, everything changed. The secret beneath the surface. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the tablet screen. His heart pounded as he tried to process what he was seeing. Isaiah's small hands gripped the device tightly, his face solemn as he studied his father's reaction. "Where did you find this?" Daniel asked, his voice carefully controlled, though tension tightened his jaw. Isaiah shifted in his seat, his fingers fidgeting on the edges of the tablet. "I looked her up last night. I couldn't sleep." Daniel took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "Why, buddy? Why did you feel the need to look her up?" Isaiah hesitated, his little hands tightening around the tablet. "Because something didn't feel right, Dad. She acts too nice. Too fake. And when I looked her up, I found this." Daniel exhaled slowly, still staring at the image on the screen. It was an old news article, but the picture was unmistakable. It was Catherine. Only she looked different. Her hair was a different color, shorter, and styled differently. But the face was the same. The article's headline sent a chill down his spine. "Local woman involved in high-profile fraud case disappears without a trace." Daniel's eyes flicked down the article, scanning it quickly. It detailed how a woman named Emily Ward, the spitting image of Catherine, had been involved in an elaborate scheme where she conned wealthy individuals out of thousands of dollars by using fake identities. She had vanished before facing charges. Daniel clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "Isaiah, are you sure this is her?" Isaiah nodded. "I did a reverse image search too. Look." He swiped his finger across the screen, pulling up more photos. Some were old, blurry surveillance pictures, but others were clearer. The resemblance was undeniable. Daniel felt like the floor had been ripped from beneath him. How had he not seen this? How had he let this woman into his life without knowing her past? But most importantly, what was she after? A growing sense of unease. Daniel rubbed his temples, trying to think. He had met Catherine a little over a year ago at a charity gala. She had been elegant, sophisticated, and confident. She was well-spoken, always poised, and had an effortless charm that made people trust her. But looking back, he realized something disturbing. He didn't actually know much about her past. She had always avoided deep discussions about her family, brushing off questions with vague answers. She had no social media, no childhood friends she kept in touch with. And the more Daniel thought about it, the more he realized that everything he knew about her was only what she had told him. What if it was all a lie? His stomach churned. Isaiah was still watching him, his small face tight with worry. "Dad, what are we gonna do?" Daniel inhaled deeply, forcing himself to think rationally. "First, we don't panic. I need to find out more before we jump to conclusions." Isaiah frowned. "But Dad, what if she's lying about everything?" Daniel reached over and put a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "I'll find out. But I need you to trust me, okay?" Isaiah nodded slowly, though the unease in his eyes didn't fade. Digging for the truth. Daniel spent the next several hours doing his own research. The deeper he dug, the worse the situation seemed. The fraud case was real, and the woman in the pictures had vanished 5 years ago. There were no records of Catherine's existence before that time. No birth certificates, no school records, no trace of her before she had suddenly appeared in high society. And most disturbing of all, there were whispers in online forums about a woman fitting her description who had been seen with different wealthy men over the years, each time disappearing after securing large amounts of money. Daniel's blood ran cold. Had he been her next target? His hands curled into fists as he stared at the screen. No, he refused to let this woman manipulate him. He had worked too hard, built too much, and most importantly, he had his son to protect. And yet, as much as he wanted to believe this was all just a misunderstanding, the evidence was piling up against her. The confrontation. Later that evening, Daniel sat on the couch, waiting. Catherine was on her way over, and he was ready for answers. Isaiah was in his room, though Daniel had told him to keep his door slightly open, just in case. When the elevator dinged and Catherine stepped inside, she was all smiles, her blonde hair curled in perfect waves, a designer dress hugging her slender frame. She looked flawless, as always. "Hey, love," she said, leaning in to kiss him. Daniel pulled back. "We need to talk." Catherine's expression flickered for the briefest second, so fast that most people wouldn't have caught it. But Daniel did. He saw the moment of tension before she recovered, forcing a bright smile. "Of course. What's wrong?" Daniel gestured to the couch. "Sit down." She hesitated but complied, smoothing the fabric of her dress as she crossed her legs. Daniel took a deep breath. "Who are you, Catherine?" Her smile wavered. "What do you mean? I'm your fiancé." "That's not what I'm asking," Daniel said, his voice cold. He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward her, showing the article Isaiah had found. "Who are you?" For a split second, something flickered in Catherine's eyes, something sharp, calculating. But then, just as quickly, she let out a soft, breathy laugh. "Daniel, where did you find this nonsense?" "It's not nonsense," he said firmly. "It's the truth, isn't it?" Catherine hesitated. Then she did something that made Daniel's skin crawl. She smiled. But this time, it wasn't her usual charming, practiced smile. It was different, colder. "I was wondering when you'd find out," she said softly. Daniel's breath hitched. "So, it's true." Catherine tilted her head slightly. "What do you think?" Daniel clenched his jaw. "I think I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life." Catherine sighed, standing up slowly. "Daniel, let's not be dramatic. I was going to tell you." "Were you?" Daniel cut in. "Or were you just waiting until I married you so you could disappear with my money?" Her expression didn't change. She didn't deny it. Daniel's stomach twisted. The woman he had been ready to spend his life with, the woman he had trusted, was a fraud. And the worst part, she wasn't even sorry. A dangerous game. "Here's what's going to happen," Daniel said, his voice steady. "You're going to leave. Right now, you're going to walk out that door, and you're never coming back." Catherine crossed her arms, studying him. "And if I don't?" Daniel took a step closer, his voice low. "Then I call the police. And trust me, with the evidence I have, they'll be very interested in finding you." Catherine held his gaze for a long moment. Then, with a small smirk, she grabbed her purse. "Well, this has been fun," she said casually. "I guess I'll be going then." She turned toward the door, but then hesitated. Slowly, she looked over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "You're a smart man, Daniel. I'll give you that." And with that, she walked out. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But as the door clicked shut, an uneasy feeling crept up his spine. Something told him this wasn't over. Shadows of deception. Daniel stood in the middle of his penthouse, his fists clenched so tightly that his nails bit into his palms. The moment Catherine walked out the door, a suffocating silence filled the room. The weight of betrayal sat heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He had been seconds away from making her his wife, from bringing her deeper into his life, from allowing her near his son. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Isaiah had been right. His 8-year-old son had seen through the act before he did. The thought filled him with both shame and gratitude. With slow, measured steps, he turned and walked toward Isaiah's bedroom. The door was cracked open just as he had asked, and as he gently pushed it wider, he found his son sitting on his bed, hugging a pillow to his chest. His small face was unreadable, but his dark eyes held the weight of a child who had seen too much, too soon. Daniel leaned against the doorway, exhaling. "You were right." Isaiah blinked, then looked down at his hands. "I know." A small, sad smile tugged at Daniel's lips. "How'd you know?" Isaiah hesitated before answering. "She was too nice to me." Daniel frowned. "Too nice?" Isaiah nodded. "The kind of nice that doesn't feel real. Like she was pretending. People who really love you don't have to try so hard." Daniel swallowed, nodding slowly. He should have paid more attention to that. Then Isaiah's grip on the pillow tightened. "Is she gone?" "For now," Daniel said, his voice steady. "But something tells me she's not going to give up that easily." Isaiah didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked up and said something that sent another wave of unease through Daniel. "Dad, what if she comes back?" The next move. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office, his laptop open, scrolling through articles, reports, and online discussions about Emily Ward, the woman he had thought he knew as Catherine. He dug deeper into her past, looking for patterns, for clues, for anything that might tell him what she was really after. The more he found, the worse it got. She had been engaged to at least 3 other wealthy men in the past. Each relationship had ended in disaster, sometimes with stolen money, sometimes with strange disappearances. She had never been caught, never been arrested. And now she had set her sights on him. Daniel's mind raced as he considered his options. He could call the police, but she was skilled at covering her tracks. There was a chance they wouldn't find enough evidence to hold her. And if she realized he was trying to have her arrested, she might disappear before they could act. No, he had to be smart about this. He had to be one step ahead. An unwanted return. 2 days passed without any sign of Catherine. Daniel remained on high alert, but the silence felt too deliberate, too planned. Then, on the 3rd morning, his phone buzzed with a message that made his stomach turn. "Catherine, we need to talk. It's important." Daniel stared at the message for a long time. He could ignore her. He could block her number and move on. But something in his gut told him that wouldn't be enough. She was still out there, still watching, still scheming. And he needed to know what she was planning next. So he replied, "Daniel, talk about what?" Her response came almost instantly. "Catherine, meet me. No drama. Just talk." "Daniel." "Where?" "Catherine, the cafe on 5th. Tomorrow morning. No tricks." Daniel hesitated. Then he made a decision. "Daniel, fine. But I'm bringing someone with me." Catherine didn't reply. But he knew she had read the message. The meeting. The next morning, Daniel sat in a quiet cafe, his back to the wall, his eyes scanning every movement. Across from him sat his friend and attorney, Jordan, a man Daniel trusted with his life. Catherine arrived exactly on time. She walked in like she owned the place, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her dress tailored to perfection. No signs of distress, no signs of someone who had just been caught in a web of lies. She sat down across from Daniel and folded her hands neatly on the table. Jordan remained silent, observing. Daniel leaned forward. "Talk." Catherine sighed, tilting her head. "You know, Daniel, I really did like you." Daniel didn't react. "You liked my money." She chuckled softly. "That too." Jordan cleared his throat. "Let's get to the point, Miss Ward. Why are we here?" Catherine's expression darkened slightly, but she didn't lose her composure. "Because I have something to offer." Daniel scoffed. "You've got nothing." She smiled again. But this time, there was something dangerous behind it. "Are you sure about that?" Daniel's jaw tightened. Catherine leaned forward. "I know things, Daniel. About you. About your business. About your life. I could make things difficult for you." Jordan immediately cut in. "That sounds like a threat." Catherine shrugged. "Call it what you want. But you and I both know that men like Daniel can't afford bad publicity." Daniel clenched his fists under the table. She was playing dirty. But he wasn't going to let her win. "You think I'm afraid of you," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. Catherine met his gaze without flinching. "I think you're smart. And smart men don't make enemies they can't handle." For the first time, Jordan leaned forward. "Miss Ward, let me make something very clear. You are not in control here. You see, while you were busy playing your games, we've been busy too." Catherine's smirk faltered. Jordan pulled out a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "Inside this folder, you'll find detailed records of your past crimes, your fraud, your disappearances, all neatly documented and ready to be handed over to the authorities. And guess what? This time, you won't disappear." For the first time, Catherine looked genuinely unsettled. Daniel leaned in, his voice a low whisper. "You made a mistake coming after me." Catherine swallowed. But then, as if flipping a switch, she smoothed her expression once again. "You think you've won." Jordan smiled. "We know we have." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Catherine stood. She straightened her dress, grabbed her purse, and exhaled. "Well, gentlemen, it seems my time here is up." Daniel didn't blink. She gave one last smirk. "Goodbye, Daniel." And with that, she walked out. Jordan turned to Daniel. "You think she's really gone?" Daniel's gaze remained on the door. "I don't know." But deep down, he had a feeling this wasn't over yet. A trap set in shadows. Daniel watched Catherine disappear through the cafe doors, his pulse steady, but his mind racing. He knew women like her didn't just walk away. She wasn't the kind to accept defeat. No, she was calculating, patient, and dangerous. He could see it in her eyes before she left. This wasn't over. Jordan, his attorney and longtime friend, drummed his fingers against the table, his sharp eyes still on the documents he had laid before Catherine just moments ago. "She's rattled," he murmured, "but not gone." Daniel exhaled through his nose, his fists still clenched under the table. "I know." Jordan's gaze flicked to him. "So, what's your move?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He knew he had to be careful. Catherine, or Emily Ward, as he now knew her real name to be, was used to slipping away when things got too dangerous. But this time, he wasn't going to let her disappear into the shadows. This time, she was going to pay. A call to action. That night, Daniel sat in his home office, illuminated only by the glow of his laptop screen. His son, Isaiah, had long since gone to bed, but Daniel's mind refused to rest. He was going through every financial record he had, double-checking his bank accounts, scrutinizing every business deal he had made over the last year. He didn't trust Catherine. If she had access to any of his accounts, if she had siphoned even a fraction of his wealth while they were together, he needed to know now. A few clicks and keystrokes later, he dialed Jordan's number. The call connected almost instantly. "She took anything?" Jordan asked, as if reading his mind. "No," Daniel said, relief washing over him. "But only for a moment. But she had access. She could have if she wanted to. That means she was playing the long game." Jordan sighed. "That's worse. It means she wasn't just in this for the money. She wanted something bigger." Daniel frowned. "Like what?" A long pause. Then Jordan said, "Power." Daniel's breath hitched. He had assumed Catherine was just another con artist looking for a quick payout. But what if she had been planning something much larger? And what if he had just disrupted it? Isaiah's warning. The next morning, Daniel was making breakfast when Isaiah wandered into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His tiny astronaut pajamas hung loosely on his small frame. "Morning, buddy," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice light. Isaiah yawned. "Morning." He climbed onto a stool and picked up a piece of toast, but Daniel could tell something was bothering him. His son had always been quiet when he was deep in thought. Daniel leaned on the counter. "What's on your mind?" Isaiah hesitated before looking up. "Dad, I saw something last night." Daniel straightened immediately. "Saw what?" Isaiah bit his lip. "A car, parked across the street. It was there for a long time. And when I looked out the window later, it was still there." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What kind of car?" Isaiah thought for a moment. "Black. Tinted windows. It left after a while, but—" He trailed off, his expression uncertain. "But what?" Daniel pressed. His son hesitated, then whispered, "I think someone was watching us. The hunt begins." That was all Daniel needed to hear. Within the hour, he had pulled the security footage from his building. He fast-forwarded through the night's recordings, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the black car parked down the street. The vehicle remained in place for hours, unmoving. And then, in the early hours of the morning, it finally drove off. Daniel exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the mouse. Catherine. She wasn't done with him yet. A dangerous game. Daniel wasted no time. He called Jordan and told him everything. "Surveillance?" Jordan asked immediately. Daniel nodded, his voice grim. "I need to know who she's working with." Jordan was silent for a moment. Then, "I have a guy." Within a few hours, Daniel had a professional investigator on the case. The man, a former private detective named Cole, was known for uncovering the secrets people didn't want found. Cole met Daniel in his office, a small smirk playing on his lips as he set down his equipment. "So, you've got yourself a stalker fiancé, huh?" Daniel scowled. "Ex-fiancé." Cole chuckled. "Not much better. All right, let's see what we're dealing with." He set up his laptop and began running a deep search on Catherine, tracking her past locations, any rental cars she had used, known aliases, and even recent bank activity. Within an hour, he found something. "She booked a hotel last night," Cole announced, pointing to his screen. "Under the name Monica Rose." Daniel's stomach clenched. She was still in the city. Cole looked up, eyes sharp. "You want me to find out what she's planning?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes." Setting the trap. The next night, Daniel parked outside Catherine's hotel, his heart pounding as he waited. Cole had already confirmed she was inside. Jordan had ensured that all legal measures were in place if she tried anything illegal. Now, All Daniel had to do was draw her out. His phone buzzed. A message from Catherine. "Catherine, you should have just let things be, Daniel." Daniel clenched his jaw and typed back, "Daniel, why? Because I wasn't dumb enough to fall for your tricks." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she responded, "Catherine, I never needed your money." Daniel frowned. "Then what did you want?" A full minute passed before she replied, "Catherine, control." Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. She wasn't just a scammer. She was a predator. And she was used to being in control. But this time she wasn't. Daniel took a deep breath, then sent one last message. "Daniel, it's over, Catherine." He waited, but no response came. Instead, a shadow moved near the hotel entrance. Daniel tensed, watching as Catherine stepped out, her sharp gaze scanning the street. She was looking for him, and she had no idea she was the one being watched. From across the street, Cole's voice came through Daniel's earpiece. "She's making a call." Daniel didn't move. To who? A pause. Then Cole said something that made Daniel's blood run cold. "She's calling someone named Derek Vaughn." Daniel's breath hitched. Derek Vaughn, a name he knew well. A ruthless businessman with ties to underground dealings. A man who had ruined others without a second thought. And now, Catherine was calling him. Daniel's heart pounded. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. The predator's web. Daniel's breath was steady, but his mind raced as he listened to Cole's voice crackle through the earpiece. "She's calling Derek Vaughn." The name sent a jolt of adrenaline through Daniel's veins. Derek Vaughn wasn't just a businessman. He was a fixer, a man who thrived in the shadows, making problems disappear for the right price. Corrupt officials, wealthy criminals, and fraudsters like Catherine or Emily Ward, as he now knew her real name, often turned to Vaughn when they needed someone out of their way. If she was reaching out to him, it meant one thing. She wasn't planning to just leave quietly. She wanted revenge. Daniel clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He was in dangerous territory now, and one wrong move could cost him everything. Cole's voice was sharp. "We need to know what she's saying." Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel, watching from the shadows as Catherine stood near the hotel entrance, phone pressed to her ear, her body language tense. She wasn't in control anymore, and she hated it. Cole's laptop hummed in the background, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "I'm trying to trace the call, but Vaughn's people are good. If he's using an encrypted line, it won't be easy." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Then we don't wait." Cole glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "What's the plan?" Daniel's eyes darkened. "We take the fight to her. A dangerous gamble." He stepped out of the car, adjusting the cuffs of his suit, masking the fury boiling beneath his calm exterior. Catherine was still talking on the phone, pacing slightly, her free hand clenched into a fist. Daniel walked toward her with slow, measured steps. She noticed him almost instantly. Her body tensed, but she didn't hang up. Instead, she smirked. "Hold on," she said into the phone, before lowering it slightly. "Couldn't stay away, could you?" Daniel didn't respond. He stopped just a few feet from her, his voice low and cold. "What are you playing at, Catherine?" Her lips curved into a smile, but her eyes burned with something darker. "I should be asking you the same thing. You humiliated me, Daniel. You made a fool out of me." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "No, you did that to yourself." Catherine exhaled sharply, tilting her head. "And yet, here you are. What do you want?" Daniel crossed his arms. "I want to know what you're planning." Catherine chuckled. "Planning? Oh, Daniel, you really think you're still in control?" She lifted her phone slightly, her thumb hovering over the screen. "One call. That's all it takes." Daniel didn't blink. "Calling Vaughn won't save you." Her expression flickered for just a moment, a crack in the mask. Then she quickly recovered. "We'll see about that." Before he could respond, She pressed the phone back to her ear. Daniel tensed. But then, call failed. Catherine froze. She pulled the phone away and stared at the screen. Confusion turned to frustration as she tried again. Call failed. Daniel's lips curled into a knowing smirk. Having trouble. Catherine's eyes snapped up, rage burning behind them. What did you do? Cole's voice came through Daniel's earpiece. Call intercepted. Vaughn won't be able to reach her. Daniel took a step closer, his voice lowering. You don't have Vaughn's help anymore, Catherine. You're alone. For the first time, fear flickered across her face. The tables turned. Catherine took a slow step back, her confidence wavering. You think you've won. Daniel tilted his head slightly. I don't think. I know. She clenched her fists, eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. I always land on my feet, Daniel. You should know that by now. Daniel exhaled, his voice filled with quiet steel. Not this time. At that moment, 2 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. The doors swung open, and 2 men in tailored suits stepped out, Jordan and a senior investigator from the authorities. Catherine's face paled. Catherine Ward, the investigator said firmly. We need to have a conversation. Her breath hitched, but she quickly masked it. Conversation. About what? Jordan stepped forward, holding a thick folder. Fraud. Identity theft. Conspiracy. Attempted extortion. He flipped the folder open, revealing documents and pictures linking Catherine to multiple crimes. And now, attempting to hire a known criminal to retaliate against Daniel Carter. Catherine's fingers curled at her sides, her jaw tightening. You can't prove anything. Jordan smirked. Actually, we can. He nodded toward Cole, who was still inside the car, watching from his laptop. We intercepted your call. Vaughn's people won't come near you now, not when they know they're being watched. Catherine's mask cracked. Her breathing grew uneven. She was cornered. Daniel took one last step forward, his voice calm but unwavering. You played your game well, Catherine, but it's over. Silence. Then something unexpected happened. Catherine laughed. It was a hollow, bitter laugh, one filled with resentment and disbelief. She shook her head, her golden hair bouncing slightly. Do you really think this is the end, Daniel? She whispered. He didn't respond. She took a step closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. I've survived worse than this. Her lips curled into a small, sinister smile. And one day, you'll regret this. Daniel met her gaze without flinching. No, I won't. The investigator gestured toward the SUV. Miss Ward, we're going to need you to come with us. Catherine hesitated, her mind visibly racing, searching for an escape. But there was none. Finally, with a slow, defeated exhale, she lifted her chin and allowed them to escort her into the vehicle. Daniel watched as the door closed behind her. A part of him expected her to try one last trick, to manipulate her way out like she always had. But this time, there was no escape. This time, she had truly lost. A new beginning. As the SUV pulled away, Daniel let out a long breath. He turned to Jordan. You think that's the last we'll hear from her? Jordan shrugged. With people like her, you never know. Daniel glanced toward the city skyline, the weight of everything settling over him. Then he thought about Isaiah. His son had seen through Catherine before anyone else. He had warned Daniel, and Daniel had nearly ignored him. That wouldn't happen again. As he pulled out his phone, he sent a message to his driver. Daniel, pick up Isaiah from school. We're going out for dinner tonight. Just me and him. A second later, the reply came. Driver. Of course, sir. Daniel put his phone away and exhaled. Catherine was gone. But the real lesson wasn't about her. It was about trust. The kind of trust that can't be bought or manipulated. And he had that trust with Isaiah. From now on, he would never let anything come between them again. The end. Or was it? As Daniel walked away, A black sedan remained parked down the street. A figure sat inside, watching, waiting, and just before driving off, a foam screen lit up. New message received. Unknown sender. It's not over yet. The final reckoning. Daniel Carter sat at the head of his penthouse dining table, watching Isaiah devour a slice of pizza. His son's small hands were messy with sauce, his laughter filling the room as he talked about his school day. For the first time in weeks, things felt normal, peaceful. But beneath the surface, Daniel's mind remained sharp, his instincts on high alert. Catherine was in custody, but he knew better than to assume she was gone for good. Women like her didn't just fade into the background. They thrived on control, on deception, on the illusion of power. She had lost this battle, but the war wasn't over yet, and Daniel had the distinct feeling that a storm was brewing. A disturbing discovery. The next morning, Daniel woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating aggressively against his nightstand. Groggy, he reached for it, blinking at the name flashing on the screen. Cole. His heart kicked up a notch. "Talk to me," Daniel said as he answered. Cole's voice was tense. "You need to get to your office. Now." Daniel swung his legs over the bed, already moving. "What happened?" A pause. Then, "Catherine's out." Daniel froze. "What?" "She made bail last night," Cole confirmed. "Someone paid it. A lot of money. We're talking powerful connections." Daniel's fingers curled into a fist. "Who?" "That's the thing," Cole said grimly. It was Vaughn. Daniel inhaled sharply. His suspicion had been right. Catherine hadn't just been conning rich men. She had been playing at something much bigger. And now she had someone like Derek Vaughn backing her. A message from the devil. Daniel arrived at his office with a sinking feeling in his gut. As soon as he stepped into the sleek, modern space, his assistant, Maya, rushed toward him. "Sir, there was a delivery this morning," she said, her voice uncertain. Daniel raised a brow. "From who?" Maya swallowed. "No name. But it's on your desk." Cautiously, Daniel entered his office. Sitting in the center of his desk was a small black velvet box. Daniel approached it slowly, his pulse steady but alert. He flicked the box open. Inside was a single playing card. The Queen of Hearts. Tucked beneath it was a note. "You should have married me when you had the chance." Daniel exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening. Catherine was taunting him. She wanted him to know she wasn't finished. But Daniel wasn't afraid. He was ready. The war begins. Jordan stormed into the office minutes later, his face lined with frustration. "We need to hit back before she makes her next move." Daniel nodded. "I agree. She's working with Vaughn now, which means she has protection. That makes things complicated." Jordan threw a thick folder onto the desk. "Not as complicated as you think. I had my people dig deeper. Vaughn may be powerful, but even he has weak spots. He's got ongoing legal battles, competitors looking for a chance to take him down. And get this, he's already under quiet investigation for laundering money." Daniel's mind clicked into place. Vaughn had money, influence, and power. But all of it was fragile. If they applied the right pressure, they could make him abandon Catherine before she had the chance to strike again. Cole leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "So what's the play?" Daniel looked at both men, his gaze dark with determination. "We make her too dangerous for Vaughn to protect." Setting the trap. The plan was simple. Expose Vaughn's weaknesses. Jordan's team would leak just enough information about Vaughn's illegal activities to law enforcement and rival business figures. Not enough to bring him down, but enough to make him paranoid. Turn his allies against him. Cole's contacts would spread rumors that Vaughn was losing his grip, that Catherine was a liability, and that getting involved with her would be a mistake. Lure Catherine out. Daniel himself would be the bait. He knew her better than anyone. She thrived on control, so he would make her think she still had it. The last meeting. 2 nights later, Daniel received the message he had been waiting for. Catherine, meet me. No security, just you and me. She had taken the bait. Daniel arrived at an abandoned rooftop bar in the city, his footsteps echoing against the cold concrete floor. The skyline stretched around him, the city lights flickering like distant stars. Catherine stood near the edge, dressed in all black, her golden hair blowing in the night wind. She looked poised, confident, but Daniel could see the tension beneath her exterior. She turned as he approached, smiling. I knew you'd come. Daniel stopped a few feet away. I wanted to see how this ends. Catherine's smile faltered. You act like this is over. It is, Daniel said calmly. Vaughn cut you loose. For the first time, true fear flickered in Catherine's eyes. You're lying, she said, but her voice wasn't as steady as before. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a single tap, he played a voicemail message. Vaughn's voice, cold and sharp. Catherine's a problem. I don't deal with problems. Fix it or cut her loose. The color drained from Catherine's face. Daniel tucked his phone away. You're alone now. She staggered slightly, gripping the railing. You ruined everything. No, Daniel said, stepping closer. You did that yourself. Silence stretched between them. Then, Catherine did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a quiet, bitter sound, full of regret and something almost sad. You really were the perfect mark, she whispered. Smart, rich, lonely. She sighed. But I underestimated you. Daniel didn't respond. He just watched as Catherine slowly backed away toward the stairwell. Her eyes met his one last time. Goodbye, Daniel. And then she was gone. The end of the nightmare. Jordan and Cole arrived moments later, but Daniel already knew Catherine was gone. Vaughn had cut her loose, her empire had crumbled, and now she would do what she did best: disappear. But Daniel wasn't worried. This time, she wasn't leaving as a predator. She was leaving as prey. A new beginning. A week later, Daniel sat in his penthouse, watching Isaiah build a Lego spaceship. His son glanced up. Dad? Yap, buddy. Isaiah hesitated. She's really gone. Daniel nodded. Yeah, she's gone. Isaiah studied his father's face, then grinned. Good. Daniel chuckled. It was over. For real this time. And for the first time in a long time, he could finally breathe.